Okay, so this is Authorial Intent for Colm Toibin for Brooklyn. So the approach we're taking is a psychoanalytic approach, which basically just means we're understanding his biography and his background, and we're using that and maybe a focus on childhood traumas and family relationships to build in our understanding of how and why he does what he does. Basically, what are his desires and how they expressed as a result through his text. In the book New Ways to Kill Your Mother, he actually takes this approach himself to different authors of taking sort of a literary criticism approach. And this quote sums it up. He says, "Every writer has something in their childhood that nourishes them, whilst also seeming to be very damaging to them at the time." So very nourishing from an artistic sense, but very damaging from a personal and relational sense. So these are the board notes we took. Keep in mind these are very rough summary based on a lot more detailed notes that we went through in class. If you want to do this to a very high level, you probably need to go use this as a guide firstly, but then go back through the detailed notes, which involve mostly quotes from interviews that Colm Toibin himself participated in. Whereas this is rather a very rough summary completed in about 50 minutes in class. So the first thing, his style is calm and chronological, and he notes himself that it's attempting to be tense but without much action. And at all times he tries to avoid describing the protagonist, and he describes his perspective as first-person intimate, though in Brooklyn it's third-person intimate. And he typically begins with images and rooms and settings, and then he builds the stories from there. Once he's sort of experienced how it is and how it would be to exist in those spaces, he can more easily create the story. So in relating to Brooklyn, Eilis is like him at boarding school, like him travelling as a journalist, and also his mum was a bookkeeper, just like Eilis is in the novel. So you could make two easy connections there between Eilis and him, and the parallels between the two, being lonely, feeling homesick, being a stranger in a strange land. In terms of religion, there's a lot of references to his psychiatrist, which I guess is modern people's replacement of religion in a lot of cases. He was raised Catholic. He notes it still holds power over him, and that his current religion is greyer than agnosticism. So it's sort of, he's very much turned away from the church and the religion of his upbringing, but he still respects and fears the church, which is something that's spread into Irish Catholics in Ireland apparently. He has no experience with pedophile priests, though he went to Catholic schooling throughout. He's noted that he had to do a great deal of work to sort of pass how that worked, the difference between the great teaching that he received and his personal experiences of excellent teaching from pleasant priests at a Catholic church, at a Catholic school rather, with the sort of the findings that came out earlier. In terms of homosexuality, obviously it's a persistent thing, but he talks about his time in Enniscorthy and it being more secretive, cloistered, and not being able to come out or open up to various people in his family. And then during his 3 years in Barcelona, homosexuality is obviously viewed more freely there than in Enniscorthy, and so he was able to really make it a greater part of his identity, and that's sort of where he got his confidence from in regards to that. Recently he's been involved in the same-sex marriage movement in Ireland, and now he's currently openly gay and in a relationship. So in terms of his family, he's commented on the fact that his uncle was a gifted poet, his mother was sort of a struggling poet who reached some local fame in her local area, and people sort of viewed her as, the woman who had written quite nice poems, but didn't go beyond probably the local area, maybe like sort of council newspapers, that sort of thing. As a job, she was a bookkeeper, and she was rather distant after the death of his father. So his father died when he was 12 from a brain aneurysm, and Colm said himself he never really recovered. And this also meant that as his father was a teacher at the school he was attending, he then moved to boarding school, in part to avoid the long shadow of his father. His house was full of books, and from a young age his parents were quite disappointed with his intellectual abilities due to various school reports and things like that. They mentioned he was the 31st out of 40 students in his class, which was disappointing to them. The big themes in all these novels are Irish society and identity, living abroad, creativity, loss, personal identity, homosexual identity, and the concept of home and what that means. His writing conditions are very strict, so he doesn't allow himself to have breakfast until he's written a certain amount. He doesn't drink during the day, and he does not have lunch with friends, as that's a waste of time for his writing process. He doesn't use a computer, uses 0 devices, as it says there. He sits in an uncomfortable chair, with many rewrites. And as you can see from the image, not a perfect example, but there was comment of writing the first draft on the left-hand side of the page and a redraft of the same text on the right-hand side, so obviously many rewrites go through his process. He struggled to attend his father's school, but at boarding school things became a lot better and he was encouraged in his ability to write. He was a bit of a slow starter, so according to various interviews, he didn't start to read until the age of 10, and he didn't talk until 9 due to a stammer. Obviously, I'm not sure if that means he didn't talk at all, couldn't talk, or whether it was just delayed, but that's kind of roughly what we've got. After the death of his father, he became quite depressed, not surprisingly. His texts explore silences, and this could be due to his developmentally late beginning of writing and reading. He travelled widely to Argentina, Sudan, Egypt, Africa, and South America as a journalist, and he writes as a voice for the voiceless. So what you need to do with these vague sort of general concepts is you're going to write about authorial intent. To do that, here's a bad example. So the base sentence is, Toibin suggests that moving beyond one's comfort zone is generally a positive experience. The bit we're adding is the authorial intent is because he did it as well. That's pretty bad. The next one is to his life as a migrant, which is a little bit better. And the last one is due to his experiences as a world-weary journalist in Sudan, Egypt, and Spain. So obviously, if you can apply some of the concepts in this video to the direct things you're talking about and be precise, that's a lot better. And then the idea is basically that you've got your quote, your explanation, your HSC sentence, your authorial style, and your authorial intent all within one paragraph. So what we've just worked on is that. It would be ideal to pause here and kind of go through and create a paragraph following all of these steps.